the biggest challenges are like around creating like mechanisms and incentives where user actions in the economy results in like user growth.
This is Pierre, co-founder of Lattice Capital, an early-stage crypto VC fund, who joins me today to talk about growth initiatives for the Web3 landscape. Thanks so much for being on today, Pierre. A year ago, Lattice wrote an article named the Web3 Growth Playbook. Now, the landscape today looks quite different, and of course, a lot of new tools are available. So how does the Web3 Growth Playbook for 2023 look like?
I think that Web3 companies don't understand their customers well, and that leads to poor customer experience and low engagement. And understanding means giving apps a richer understanding of who their users are beyond the wallet address. So first, you need Web3 native tools to identify, as I said, users and their behaviors, meaning that you have to use companies that leverage things like NFTs, on-chain credentials, public keys, ENS addresses, and many other things. So this attribution and identity layer is still pretty nascent. Then you need solutions that improve the whole funnel. In Web2 you have stuff like Google Ads for user acquisition, Mixpanel or Amplitude for engagement, and MailChimp for retention. So I think that the objective is to identify specific group of users, design for the actions, and eventually establish a sustainable growth strategy that amplifies over time, basically. So regarding user acquisition, you have innovation around better segmentation, cohort construction, and ultimately higher quality experiences for the end user. So once a user is onboarded, you have to understand their behavior and interaction with the product, right? So in the current landscape, you have tools to collect customer data across different sources. For example, wallet interaction data on the blockchain, events data on different decentralized applications, and so on. Today, I think that product and growth teams must have the capability to establish a correlation between specific actions within their application and on-chain identities of the users, so that they can make more informed decisions. And the final step of the funnel is the retention part. So Web3 native tooling facilitates large-scale coordination through incentives. A good thing with the retention layer that I mentioned before is that product can provide rewards in the form of financial value now, which is very powerful. And for example, we backed a company at Lattice called Galx, which used to be called Project Galaxy, which is building on-chain credentials and other proof of attendance NFTs.
As blockchain data is still difficult to access, how do you see the development of analysis tools evolve?
The existing querying tools are manual and don't scale across the customer base. And so as a result, the majority of decentralized application or broken or abandoned and struggle to make it beyond the 1 year mark. And there is also the fact that, let's be honest, I think the vast majority of Web3 companies haven't found product market fit, and there is still a relatively low willingness to pay for that type of product, because if you still don't have power users, why would you analyze them and just try to understand the customers, just try to understand the behaviors on chain? That just doesn't make sense. So I think that it's still very early on one end, and on the other end, the data stack is still pretty difficult to access and to leverage in a very optimal way. So, but I'm still very bullish on this massive opportunity in the space.
This episode is brought to you by Lens Protocol. Lens Protocol is a Web3 social graph designed to empower creators with full ownership and control over their content and community. Lens isn't a social media app, it's a protocol that lets Web3 social apps thrive through its open source tech stack. When you create content on Lens, you own it, you control it, you take it from app to app, and you decide how it's being monetized. While Lens might just be the last social media handle you will ever need to create. Lattice has spent years helping to drive growth initiatives at leading companies in the space, including CoinList and Solana. What's the biggest learning from driving these initiatives?
I learned a lot from these initiatives, obviously, especially importance of partnerships and communities in Web3. So first, like obviously it's not uncommon for software companies to grow through like large business development deals, and like several Web3 projects have like implemented this strategy very early, like Chainlink in 2017, 2018. But in Web3, business development may be different, as these like partnerships are very often like negotiated publicly in governance forums rather than like privately. That's like a first component of it. And there are like several types of Web3 native partnerships with like, for example, what we call like Lego building for DeFi protocols, for example, which is like very interesting. So that was my first like big learning. And then like I learned a lot about the importance of community-led initiatives. Like one of the most distinctive characteristics of Web3 is that users can like fund the projects, information and services that they consume. So we're still at the very early stage of understanding like the full impact of that innovation, but it's not like surprising that many Web3 companies find community roles to be more critical than sales and marketing roles, right? I believe that like community plays a key role in network growth, as like an active community can provide like networks with like an advantage in all their like NTA wars. And look, this is visible in the Twitter feeds or projects with like active communities. Every like announcement generates like a lot of engagement and retweets.
As you just mentioned that the community plays a key role, can you give us an example of a Web3 company that outperforms in community building?
I think what Dune Analytics did with the Wizards community is like honestly very impressive. The fact that you have like a ranking and that the more data is like uploaded on Dune, the more you create the network effects is a good reason for that, like the power of the Dune community. Yeah, you have like the stars ranking system, which is like on paper pretty basic, but can create this kind of like community-led product initiatives, which were like very, very useful to bootstrap things in the beginning for Dune. And yeah, I mean, I recommend like anybody to read that article made by the journalist about the Dune community, which is like one of the very few like successful companies in Web3 to date.
Today's episode is brought to you by Talent Protocol. Talent Protocol is the Web3 professional platform for high potential builders. Create a Web3 resume to make meaningful connections and to unlock access to scholarships and work opportunities. Talent Protocol is a community with a mission to help the next generation of talented builders to achieve fulfillment and success. Sign up today with the link below and receive $50 worth of TAL tokens when you complete your profile.
Now moving on to 2023, what are 3 growth predictions that you are most excited about?
First, I'm like pretty excited about like how brands and like creators think about relationships. Like when brands issue like their like own native tokens through like a blockchain, they create like a direct relationship with their like token holders, right? When Web2 social platforms try to create a relationship, it's always like they control like the brand audience relationship. There is like less freedom. So tokens can be like issued in many forms and like at various like stages of the customer journey. And this like unlocks many use cases. Like for example, I mean like brands can increase like customer engagement and loyalty by creating and managing their like own communities, where like customers can share like ownership and become like more invested in the brand. We've seen like big corporations experimenting with that in 2022, and I think that's only the beginning. So that's a massive design space I'm like very excited about. Then I'm like very excited about new strategies to get new customers. Like acquiring new customers can be like difficult for brands sometimes. And one of the biggest challenges for like marketers is like reaching a relevant audience that has like demonstrated like an interest in the brand's products. And social tokens and airdrops can be like a powerful tool for targeting like a specific audience. So airdrop inefficiencies has been like a long discussed topic in this space, but new tools will like enable teams to run like a process where they can like hypothesize, deploy, observe, measure, and like iterate based on the results of experiments. And they can like then begin to optimize for relevant network like health metrics like retention, CAC, payback periods, and like user token holder ratio. And like maybe another thing I'm very excited about is like new incentives, new incentive models in the Web3 growth stack. Like you can like easily imagine a world where decentralized applications are incentivized to store their like user data with rewards as a share of like the direct value that is created for like other stakeholders in the system, which could be like measured by usage, for example.
To close it off, can you discuss any notable trends that you're currently seeing in the overall industry?
I think that non-transferable like soul-bound tokens will find use cases in 2023. I recently did like some research on the current state of the decentralized governance landscape, and a new RC20 based voting system has like many pitfalls because the governance power should not be transferable or bound by anyone with no competence to govern. So this is like one specific use case among like many others, but I'm like honestly pretty bullish on like SBTs if they're like used in a smart manner. Another trend I'm like excited about is like nothing very innovative or exotic, but I still think that NFTs long-term fundamentals to act as a digital ownership still like remains intact. Like corporations and brands will like continue viewing NFTs as a differentiated like form of marketing like spend, creating more like real world use cases. Long-lasting adoption will be driven by like some sort of like tangible utility, and more Web2 companies will like continue to use NFTs to like strengthen customer relations. I could also like mention like ENS, which is like a very interesting ecosystem in this space. I'm like very bullish on. I honestly think that, you know, like ENS has like experienced meaningful growth in 2022 across like different like indicators, new registrations, active users, and like time length of registrations. And I think that these data points indicate that ENS is like transitioning past the hype stage into something of like substance on the identity front in Web3. So I'm pretty bullish on anything related to ENS for 2023 as well.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're keen to learn more about the Web3 landscape, don't forget to subscribe to be notified once our next video is up.